My family asked me to postpone my wedding for a vacation with my favorite brother, but I got married without telling them. And when they saw the photos on social media, I blocked them forever. I'm 32 years old. I work in digital marketing for like 5 years now, and I need to tell this story because what happened a few months ago basically destroyed what was left of my relationship with my parents. The truth is, it was never good. But this was the definitive end, the point of no return. I guess I should start at the beginning. When I was a kid and my brother Gregory was already the perfect son, my parents always wished I would be too. Gregory is 8 years older than me. So when I was born, he was already like the family prodigy, getting good grades, being polite, doing everything right. I came along as an accident, basically, although my parents never said it directly, but you could tell in the way they talked about their life before I was born, like everything had been perfect until I showed up. Kenneth and Nancy, my parents, always compared everything I did with what Gregory had done at my age. And obviously, I was never up to par. Gregory at 10 was already reading advanced books. Gregory at 12 won a science award. Gregory never had problems at school. I, on the other hand, was the disaster. The one who always screwed up. The troublemaker. It's not that I was so bad. Really. I think I was just a normal kid who didn't fit into the perfect mold they wanted. I got into some trouble in high school. Nothing serious, but teenager stuff, coming home late, failing a couple of subjects, hanging out with friends my parents didn't like. But the way they reacted was like I was a juvenile delinquent or something. Meanwhile, Gregory was already in college studying business administration, on a full scholarship, being amazing as always. When I grew up, things didn't improve much. I studied graphic design, which for my parents was basically throwing my life away because it wasn't a real career like Gregory's, who by then was already working at a big company making tons of money. Then I switched to digital marketing, and things went well for me. I have a stable job. I earn decently, but for my parents it was never enough, because Gregory by that time had already opened his own company, had married a woman my parents adored, and was expecting his first child. Every family gathering was torture. My parents talked about Gregory all the time, about how proud they were, how successful he was, how beautiful his family was. I could be sitting right there at the table and it was like I was invisible. If I mentioned something about my work or my life, I'd get an, "Oh, that's nice," without much interest, but if Gregory said anything, it was like he'd discovered the cure for cancer. I met Kimberly like 7 years ago at a marketing conference, and honestly, she's the best thing that's ever happened to me. She's smart, funny, she supports me in everything, and most importantly, she was the first person who really saw me for who I am, not as the defective version of Gregory. We'd been dating 6 years when I decided to propose, and she said yes, obviously, because we have an amazing relationship and we'd been living together for like 3 years already. 10 months ago, I got down on one knee and officially proposed with a ring and everything. It was perfect. I told my parents like 2 days later, hoping that at least this time they'd show some genuine excitement for me. My mom said she was happy and gave me a quick hug. My dad said congratulations and shook my hand. Gregory and his wife invited us to dinner when they found out, and the whole dinner was basically them giving advice about marriage, like they were world experts. They'd been married like 5 years. It's not like they were exactly veterans, but whatever. We started planning the wedding together with Kimberly's family, who, by the way, are incredible and treated me like part of the family from the beginning. We decided to do something small, like 70 people. Nothing extravagant, but nice. We chose the date with 8 months' notice and communicated it to everyone, to family, to friends, to everybody. My parents said they'd be there. That, of course, they wouldn't miss it. Blah, blah, blah. Everything was going well until like 2.5 months ago, 2 weeks before the wedding. We were in the final stretch, confirming details, paying the last deposits, all the normal stress of organizing a wedding. And then I got a call from my mom. She told me they needed to talk to me about something important. I went to their house the next day, thinking that maybe they wanted to help with something last minute, or, I don't know, something related to the wedding. I arrived, and they were both sitting in the living room with those serious faces they make when they're going to say something they know I'm not going to like. My dad got straight to the point. He said that Gregory had planned a family vacation to Australia, that it was a trip they'd been dreaming of doing for years, that the dates coincided with my wedding, and that basically they had decided to go on the trip instead of coming to my wedding. I sat there processing what I'd just heard, because honestly I couldn't believe it was real. I said, "You're joking, right?" And my mom, with tears in her eyes, like playing the victim, said that Gregory had gotten some incredible packages, that it was a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity, that they were taking his two kids, who were now like 6 and 4 years old, and that it had been very difficult for them to get the dates. I asked them, "And you couldn't choose literally any other date?" And my dad said no, that those were the only dates available with the special discount Gregory had found. Then my mom dropped the bomb. She asked me if we could postpone the wedding a few months, like as if changing a completely organized wedding was as simple as changing a dentist appointment. I explained to them that we'd already paid for everything, that the guests already had their plans made, that Kimberly's family already had their plane tickets bought because several live in other states, that it was literally impossible to change everything at the last minute. And my dad told me, well, then they'd have to miss the wedding, that they were very sorry, but it was an opportunity they couldn't pass up. I left there shaking with rage, literally felt like my head was going to explode. Kimberly was waiting for me at home, and when I told her, she got furious too. Said she couldn't believe my own parents were choosing a vacation with my brother over my wedding. Her family was equally outraged when they found out. But what hurt me most, really, was that they didn't even seem conflicted about the decision, like it was obvious that for them it wasn't a difficult decision at all. I spent like a week mulling over the issue, not sleeping well, angry all the time, and then I had an idea. I sent my parents a message telling them I was considering postponing the wedding, that I needed to talk to Kimberly and the venue to see if it was possible, that I'd let them know soon. They responded super relieved. Like, "Thank you for understanding. We knew you'd comprehend. You're a good son." It made me sick to read those messages, honestly. But I wasn't going to postpone anything. We went ahead with all the plans exactly as they were. I told all the guests that my parents couldn't attend due to a family matter, that they were very sorry but they sent their blessings. Pure lies. But I didn't want everyone to know the embarrassing truth that my parents had chosen a vacation over my wedding. Kimberly's family knew the truth, obviously, but nobody else. The wedding was beautiful, seriously. It was one of the best days of my life, despite everything. Kimberly looked incredible. We had an amazing time with our friends and her family, who treated me like their own son. We danced, ate well, everything was perfect. Kimberly's dad even told me at one point that he was proud to have me as a son-in-law, and I almost started crying right there, because I'd never heard anything like that from my own father. Obviously, we took like a million photos, as you do at weddings, and a few days later they started appearing on social media, guests tagging us, the photographer uploading the professional photos, all that. I didn't think much about it. I was too happy enjoying the first days of being married. Like 3 days after the wedding, I got like 15 missed calls from my mom. When I finally answered, she was hysterical, screaming about how was it possible that I'd gotten married, that we'd agreed I was going to postpone the wedding, that she couldn't believe I'd lied to them like that. I told her very calmly that I never said I was going to postpone, that I said I was going to consider it and I considered no, that the wedding went ahead as it had been planned for 8 months. My dad got on the phone and started with how I was ungrateful, that after everything they'd done for me, this is how I repaid them, that it was shameful that I'd had the wedding without them. I told them that they were the ones who decided not to go, that I'd given them 8 months' notice, that they'd had all that time not to plan a trip for the same dates. My mom was crying in the background, saying I'd betrayed them, that Gregory didn't even know about the exact date of the wedding when they planned the trip, that I should have reminded them. That made me explode. I yelled at them that how could Gregory not know if I'd told everyone 8 months ago? To stop lying to protect him, that for once in my life they should admit that I simply mattered less to them than he did. I hung up the phone, shaking with rage, and Kimberly hugged me while I tried to calm down. The next few days were chaos with messages. Gregory sent me a long message saying I was immature, that I'd caused a huge family problem, that Mom was devastated and Dad was considering cutting me off completely. I responded that perfect. They should do whatever they wanted. That I was already fed up with being the second-class son. I thought that's where it would all end. that we'd simply drift apart and that's it. But like 2 weeks later, right when they got back from Australia, my dad showed up at my door. It was like 9 in the morning on a Saturday. I was just getting up. I opened the door, and there they both were, with their suitcases still. Apparently, they'd come straight from the airport. My dad said we needed to talk, that this couldn't continue like this. I let them in because I wasn't going to have a scene in the hallway of my building. They sat down in the living room and started again with the same thing. How could I have done that to them? That they'd missed one of the most important days of my life because of me. That the whole family was talking about what had happened, and they were embarrassed. I told them very clearly that they missed it by their own choice, that nobody forced them to go on the trip. My mom said, I didn't understand how difficult it was for them, that Gregory had worked very hard to be able to pay for that trip for everyone, that it was important to him to be able to do something special for the family. And right there it became crystal clear to me that even after everything they still didn't see it, they still didn't understand that they'd chosen me second place once again. Kimberly came out of the bedroom in pajamas, stood next to me and told my parents they had to leave, that they weren't going to come to our house to make me feel bad for getting married, that they had their chance to be there, and they rejected it. My mom told Kimberly she didn't understand family dynamics, that this wasn't her business. And there, Kimberly responded that, of course it was her business, that I was her husband now and she wasn't going to let them keep treating me like trash. Things escalated fast. My dad told Kimberly to shut up, that this was between family. I stood up and told them to get out of my house, that if they couldn't respect my wife, then they had no business being there. My mom started crying, saying she couldn't believe I was choosing a stranger over my own family. I told her that Kimberly was my family now, that they'd made it clear that I was never really part of theirs. They finally left between shouts and slamming doors. My mom was crying and my dad pointed at me saying that someday I was going to regret this. I closed the door and stood there feeling 1,000 things at once: anger, sadness, relief, guilt, all mixed together. Like 3 weeks of total silence passed. I continued with my life, working, enjoying my marriage, trying not to think too much about all the family drama. And then I received a long message from my mom. It was like a half apology where she said she'd been thinking a lot, that maybe they'd been too hard on me, that they wanted to fix things. She said she understood I was upset, but that in the end we were family and family forgives, that they were inviting me to dinner at their house so we could talk calmly and start over. I didn't want to go, really, but Kimberly told me maybe I should give them a chance, that maybe they really wanted to make peace. I hesitated a lot but finally accepted. I replied that we'd go to dinner the following Friday. My mom responded super excited, saying that's great, they'd expect us at 7. Friday we arrived like at 7:05. I knocked on the door and my mom opened with a huge smile that seemed weird to me, like forced. We went in and I noticed the table was set for more than 4 people, but I didn't say anything. And we went into the living room, and that's when I saw the small suitcases next to the sofa and heard children's voices coming from the kitchen. My stomach dropped. I asked my mom who else was there, and she, with that same fake smile, said she'd invited Gregory and his family, that she thought it would be good if we all talked together, that we'd start rebuilding as a complete family. I looked at Kimberly and saw on her face that she also wanted to run out of there. Gregory came out of the kitchen with his 2 kids, gave me a hug. I didn't return and said something like, "Brother, so good to see you." His wife came out too and greeted us all awkward. My parents guided us all to the dining room, and the most tense dinner of my life began. During the first few minutes, everyone acted like everything was fine, making superficial conversation about the weather, work, the kids. But I was boiling inside because they'd ambushed me. They'd lied to get me to come. Finally, my dad cleared his throat and said, well, we were all there to talk about what had happened, to clear things up. I told him there was nothing to clear up, that things were pretty clear. My mom insisted there had been misunderstandings, that nobody had wanted to hurt anyone. And then Gregory, with that arrogance he's always had, said he understood why I was upset, but I also had to understand his happy time, position, that the trip had been very important for him and his family, that it had been a unique opportunity to take his kids to see Australia. I asked him directly, "You knew about the date of my wedding when you planned the trip, yes or no?" He was quiet for a moment, and then said, well, that yes, he had known. That Mom had mentioned something, but honestly, it hadn't seemed that important to him, that he thought I was going to postpone anyway if they couldn't go. There, I lost my patience. I got up from the table and told him I couldn't believe what I was hearing. That he'd just admitted he knew perfectly well about my wedding, and that anyway he planned the trip for the same dates. And that on top of that, my parents had lied to me, saying he didn't know. My dad tried to defend him, saying Gregory didn't think I'd actually have the wedding without them, that any normal son would have postponed. I told him that was the problem, that for them, I'd never been the normal son, the good son, that I was always the one who didn't matter as much. My mom started crying, saying that wasn't true, that they loved me the same as Gregory. I told her that actions spoke louder than words, and their actions had made it very clear for 32 years that Gregory was more important than me. Gregory stood up and told me I'd always been dramatic, that I'd always blamed others for my problems, that I should grow up once and for all. Something in me broke in that moment. I yelled at him that he was a hypocrite, that he'd lived his whole life being the favorite without having to work for anything because Mom and Dad had already given him all the love and validation I never had. Kimberly grabbed my arm and told me we had to leave. She was right. I looked at my parents and told them this had been their chance to really apologize, to really understand what they'd done, and that instead they'd set a trap for me and had defended Gregory again, as always. I told them I didn't want to see them again, that I was fed up with being treated like I didn't matter. My mom ran toward me, trying to stop me, begging me not to leave, but I was already at the door. Gregory yelled, something about how I always ran away from things, that I never faced problems. I turned around and told him that the only problem I needed to face was accepting that my biological family was never going to value me and that it was time to let them go. We left and Kimberly drove back home because I was shaking too much. I cried in the car. I'm not going to lie. I cried like I hadn't cried in years. It wasn't just about the dinner. It was about everything. About a whole life of feeling less than. Of being the backup son. Of never being enough. When we got home, I blocked my parents from my phone. From social media. From everywhere. I blocked Gregory too. I told Kimberly I didn't want to know anything about them anymore, and she supported me completely. Her parents called me the next day when they found out what had happened and told me they were my family now, that they'd always been since they met me. It's been like 2 months since that dinner. My parents tried to contact me through mutual friends, through distant relatives, but I've been firm in my decision. I don't want their half apologies. I don't want more reconciliation attempts where they basically expect me to forget everything and go back to accepting being the second son. An aunt wrote to me saying I was being cruel to my parents, that they only wanted the best for me. I responded that the best for me was to have peace of mind, and that wasn't possible with them in my life. Kimberly and I are planning our belated honeymoon for next month. We're going to Japan, which is something we've always wanted to do. I'm focusing on building my own family, on surrounding myself with people who really value me. Work is still going well. My relationship with my wife is incredible. And for the first time in my life, I feel like I can breathe without that constant pressure of not being good enough. Do I regret getting married without them? No, not at all. Do I regret cutting them out of my life? Neither. Maybe it sounds harsh. Maybe there are people who think I should forgive and give them another chance. But the truth is, I already gave them 32 years of chances and it was always the same. At some point, you have to decide that your mental health and your happiness are more important than maintaining toxic relationships, even if those relationships are with your blood family. Last week, I ran into an old family friend. At the supermarket, he asked me how things were with my parents because he'd heard there were problems. I told him we had no contact, and I was fine with that. He looked at me weird, like as if I were the bad guy in the story, and told me that family is the most important thing. I responded that he was right. That family is the most important thing. That's why I chose to stay with the one that really treats me like family. I don't know what's going to happen in the future. Maybe in a few years things will change, maybe not. What I do know is that for now, I'm at peace with my decision, and that's enough.